Have you ever stumbled upon a cave in Skyrim, only to discover it's inhabited by bandits? Or what about those old imperial forts that dot the landscape, the silent remnants of a bygone era? You ever wanted to simply admire their rustic architecture only to realize that they too are overtaken by brigands? Or what about simply strolling across the land, following one of the major roads, just for safety, only to be ambushed by, you guessed it, outlaws? Alright, it's perfectly clear that Skyrim has a problem, and it's really hard to ignore it, as it's being literally overtaken by criminals of all kinds, one hold at a time.
Tell you what.
Bandits are one of the most common enemies in Skyrim. That's not a surprise. Those rugged, dare I say good-looking nomads preferring a more carefree lifestyle outside the city walls. They are found in pretty much every hole in Skyrim, you name it. A cave, fort, ruin, a mine, or even casually wandering through a forest in search of a next victim. And when it comes to this, let's say, a faction, one of the most interesting facts is that bandit population outnumbers that of regular citizens. That's right, there are more outlaws than there are honest-to-standard, hard-working, law-abiding citizens. And naturally, there's a perfectly good explanation for this, as developers, for gameplay reasons, had to scale down the size of Skyrim and its cities, thus making everything far more compressed. So large medieval cities like Whiterun or Solitude had to be reduced into glorified villages, with a few dozen NPCs. On the other hand, bandits had to stay. They are the bread and butter of every honest RPG, and I'll be first to admit that I, for the most part, love their presence in Skyrim. Even their lore, as obscure as it may be, there is something incredibly fun about raiding bandit dungeons and just witnessing their daily lives and the way they decorate interiors. Ironically, in many ways, bandits are the embodiment of that true Nordic, barbaric, pre-modern spirit that Skyrim was aiming at. But obviously, you can't just populate every corner of the world with bandits and leave them without any in-game explanation. I mean, sure, we mentioned technical gameplay causes, but what are some of the in-game lore reasons for Skyrim being such a wild, lawless wasteland? In other words, why are there so many bandits? And not only that, there are clear examples of bandits owning important roads, quite openly between major cities. Waldheim comes to mind, those magnificent Nordic towers straddling the White River, not far from Whiterun, or the road leading to or from Riften, and so on. I often talk in my videos about the overall decaying state of the 4th era Skyrim, so I'm not going to go over that again. Things are obviously bad, and they are not getting better anytime soon. Civilization collapse causes anarchy. The ongoing civil war is tearing the land apart, Talmor is doing Talmor things, High King is dead, and Empire weaker than ever. Quite a fertile ground for illegal activities, as many would turn to crime for their support. So Skyrim bandits make perfect sense, just how Morrowind was logically filled with smugglers and slavers. Bethesda at least tries to give these enemies some background, a canonical reason for their existence. But all of that aside, I always felt that there's some big secret behind Skyrim's bandits. The way they are organized and settled in those forts and camps, it's very tribal or clan-based. Even their leaders are called chiefs, not bosses or CEOs. And most of the time, these are not your regular, simple robbers terrorizing neighborhood for a coin and a bottle of ale. They almost seem to have a culture and a religion of their own, running parallel to the, let's say, mainstream Nord one. I am aware of the fan theory that Skyrim's bandits are in fact Nords adhering to their ancient, almost forgotten religion. You know, all that yelling about Shor, Ysmir, Sovngarde. Nords who decided to leave civilization behind and live according to the old ways, as true Nords, as they would say, expecting nothing less than Sovngarde as their reward. I think that there is some truth to that, as we're gonna see in one of today's stories.
Victory or Sovngarde!
Speaking of, today I wanted to talk about 4 unique bandits, minor villains, or let's call them mini-bosses, characters that have a surprisingly detailed background. I say surprisingly because, as we all know, Skyrim's bandits are for the most part generic and nameless. They come in a number of predefined models and that's it. And coming from years of playing Morrowind, this lack of individuality always bothered me. However, Skyrim does have a few named bandits, and they come even with a small storyline, making them really stand out because, in my opinion, this is where Bethesda shines, in building these small, slice-of-life storylines that seamlessly blend so well with the rest of the world. It's the art of world building through few lines, hints and implications. Over the years, I found these topics perhaps my favorite in all of Elder Scrolls. Stories of insignificant characters caught in a web of fate. For me, this is what makes each Elder Scrolls game so alive and fun to explore. And for today, I prepared just that. We will cover, as I said, 4 characters, and also one more as a small bonus. All of them are, not surprisingly, Nords, except one, an Altmer. I've decided to include this character because of his story. As an Altmer, he isn't technically a bandit, because Skyrim, interestingly enough, doesn't have Altmer bandits, but there are plenty of hostile Altmer mages, necromancers, and other villains that basically serve the same purpose. And this one, let's just say that his story will chill you to the bones. Before we begin, I just want to say that following stories won't unravel the big, overarching secret behind the bandits in general, if there's even one. But they will help us understand somewhat better the way these people think and operate, and how they even ended up on the other side of the law. These lore fragments will help us humanize characters that otherwise serve as faceless, nameless spawns on our never-ending hero's journey. You know, people always ask why are there bandits, but never how are bandits. My name is Alec, and these are the Skyrim's strange, tragic, or otherwise unique and interesting small-time villains. I hope you enjoyed.
You're a disgrace to your own kind.
Our first story is set in the pleasant and evergreen Falkreath Hold. You see, while hiking the cozy road between Helgen and the city of Falkreath, traveler may notice this secluded cottage just off the road, kinda hidden behind the bushes. It's not an unusual sight, as vast forests of Falkreath host a number of mills and cottages of all types. But there is something unusual about this one, called Pinewatch. There is no one around, and it's just eerily quiet. Too quiet. Someone is obviously living there, as it has this tiny little garden and a large woodpile. But the first sign that this is no ordinary farmstead are the doors that remain heavily locked at all times, and this mysterious sign carved into the wall and hidden behind the barrel. For the uninitiated, this may as well be a random, weird symbol, but for the initiated, it means danger. It's a shadow mark left by the Thieves Guild, warning its members to stay clear from this place. Alright, so why would this quiet small cottage in the middle of the forest scare away entire thieves guild? I mean, what can be so terrible inside? Well, Pinewatch has a secret. This isn't your everyday regular bandit hideout, even though upon breaking in, player will find it a pretty much standard looking. It's a little bit rough though, but nothing out of ordinary, except maybe for all the armory and weaponry. There's also a single bandit downstairs, and that's pretty much it. Well, doesn't seem like a very dangerous place, yet.
With 3 beers down, the orc did frown, and bid the elf goodbye. For none could know 'twas not for show, and someone had to die.
So, what we're gonna do is look around and search for clues. In particular, we're gonna read all the notes. And believe me, this storyline is all about the notes. First one is pinned on the wall, quite menacingly, and reads: "You've all been warned about trying to break into my treasure room, but Roras didn't think I was serious. Now he's dead. You've all had your cut of the take already, and if I catch any of you dung-lickers trying to break in again, I won't let the traps kill you. I'll do it myself." Signed, Rigel Strong-Arm. And there it is, our introduction to Rigel's character, sort of. As for the note itself, again, it's nothing out of ordinary, as Skyrim has tons of similar notes, left by all kinds of characters. But this letter of warning is only the beginning of a rabbit hole. There's a second letter downstairs, and as it turns out, it's another one from Rigel, this time directed to someone called Rorlak. We got the right card this time. The note has been sent, and we'll see how they respond. In the meantime, we'll keep breaking down the stuff. You keep selling off the wood to keep our front. If we can get a good price for the mold, we should be set for a while. Oh, and we left some wine for you in the bucket behind the shelf. Consider it a bonus. Signed, Rigel Strong-Arm. So before we move on, a little explanation. This character of Rorlak appears only if we enter Pinewatch through a certain Thieves Guild questline. He is a simple bandit who poses as a woodcutter living alone in the cottage. And the mold is really just an expensive item that player needs to obtain for the guild. But note also has this strange line, a bucket behind the shelf. And this is where things get a bit more interesting. Keen eye will notice a button on the wall next to the table. Pressing it will reveal a secret tunnel behind the shelves. How mysterious! And it's also at this point that we realize that this location has to offer much more than what we previously expected. I also wonder who built this cottage on the top of an ancient Nordic ruin, all together with a secret door mechanism. It's such a brilliant idea and a cover for any type of secret operation. You'd basically own a large dungeon as your personal basement. I honestly doubt it was Rigel and her gang, as it always seemed to me that they simply discovered the place and moved in. I could be wrong, of course, but Rigel herself writes that they moved in quite recently. We never got an explanation for it, but I'd also like to mention that in some older maps, there was a village of Oakwood, located approximately where Pinewatch stands today. So I wonder if there was a village here at some point, with this cottage being all that's left. So maybe some much smarter Nords centuries ago discovered the ruins and built a house over it, for some reason. I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out why would someone go through so much trouble of doing all of this. In any case, going down the not-so-secret tunnel anymore, we enter a large Nordic chamber, with wooden bridges all over the place. Ground is covered with piles upon piles of wood, since this whole operation is hiding behind the wood-cutting business. And there are also dead merchants, mostly Khajiit, as they seem to be the ones taking the risk of traveling across Skyrim nowadays. While here, I just have to say how I love the unexpected environmental change and the sudden dungeon delving experience, because just minutes ago we were enjoying a pleasant walk between the pine trees of Falkrit, then we discovered a secluded little cottage, and now, all of a sudden, we found ourselves exploring these truly ancient, forgotten ruins deep underground. There are few times when Skyrim surprises players with such unsuspecting twists and turns, and this one is one of my favorites. Next and final section is my favorite part of the dungeon, Pinewatch Bandits Sanctuary. First area is guarded by 3 bandits, one of which is a magic user, and is absolutely stacked with barrels and crates of all sizes. What's funny is that all 3 bandits will have a letter written by Roras, urging them to rob Rigel Strong-Arm. And as we already found out, not the best idea, as it didn't end well for him. Letter says, "Come on, it won't be that bad. Rigel may be paranoid, but she's as dumb as a mammoth. Body hair like one too. I'm just saying, if we can get into the treasure room, we would be set. We could just take the money and head north to catch a ship. I know a guy whose cousin knows a guy that could get us up with some pirates in Hammerfell. And in the meantime, we could live high on that money for months." I'm not so sure about the dumb as a mammoth part, since Rigel pretty much founded and operates what seems to be a successful criminal empire. But as we're gonna see, she really is paranoid. I mean, who can blame her, as even her own gang members attempt robbing her. And the final chamber before meeting Rigel herself is this customized bar, the very image of bandits, building their own bars in caves and partying after a successful raid, to me reaffirms the idea that these are, in a lack of a better word, real functioning communities and not temporary hideouts. And in many other instances across Skyrim, we see bandits maintaining not only bars, but forges, crafting stations, alchemy labs, kitchens, large storage areas with plenty of game, and different bandits are assigned different roles based on their skills. Again, entire bandit faction, taken as a whole, functions like a truly separate society or culture. And the Rigel Strong-Arm is definitely the leader of this group, as her warning notes can be found all over the place. Her private quarters and sleeping area are naturally in the deepest area of the cave. I love how she decorated the wooden wall with a mammoth skull. It makes for a memorable moment seeing it for the first time. It also makes me wonder if she personally killed a mammoth and displayed the skull as a trophy. Something that would be considered, I assume, rather heroic in the Nordic culture, and reaffirm her alpha status within the group. There's also a troll skull underneath, could be another of her trophies and proof of her unusual strength. I mean, she is called Strong-Arm after all, but also likened to a mammoth by her companions. In terms of intelligence and body hair, sure, but it could also be a subtle reference to her mammoth-like or even giant-like strength. Pinewatch gang is quite numerous, at least a dozen or more bandits in total. And to rule over such a tough group of unruly people, leader has to be either exceptionally intelligent or even more so strong. And in Rigel's case, I think it's obvious we are dealing with someone gifted with an extraordinary strength. Remember, none of the bandits attempt an actual attack on Rigel. They simply plan to rob her treasure room and run away as far as possible. And while we are here talking about giants and mammoths, there could be another quite subtle reference, although I'm gonna say right away it's really far-fetched, but that won't stop me from talking about it. Her name, Rigel, isn't your typical Nord-sounding name, and that in itself isn't that weird, as every once in a while we do meet a Nord whose name isn't typically Scandinavian or Nordic. In her case, I'm pretty sure that it was inspired by a real-life star, Rigel, belonging to the constellation of Orion. And the star Rigel itself is classified as a blue-white supergiant, and Orion is a famous mythological giant. Obviously, none of them exist in the Elder Scrolls universe, but there are so many references to giants. And having a mammoth skull decorating her private chamber, a giant animal that is often domesticated by giants, to me it all speaks of her giant strength. And combat-wise, Rigel will always spawn at the highest possible level, reaching up to level 26, thus offering quite a challenge. But with all of that said, Rigel Strong-Arm is in fact quite a tragic figure. And most players discover that after killing her, making their victory kinda bittersweet. I remember killing her for the first time, thinking she's just some random bandit with an unusual name, until I read her personal letters found on this table. Rigel has an unusually detailed backstory, and I'm saying that because there was really no need for writers to add any of that, but they did, and it's very effective. It turned Rigel from a ruthless paranoid bandit chief into someone I honestly felt bad for killing. There's a short correspondence between Rigel and her father, and while reading it, we discover perhaps the roots of her behavior. First of all, let's read her father's letter. By the 9, Rigel, think about what you're doing. I don't care if you kill off a couple of skooma-headed Khajiit traders. They have no business being in Skyrim anyway. But think about what you're doing. There are armies fighting out there and they're bound to use the roads from time to time. They're going to start noticing if traders go missing, and for that matter, why don't you just join up with one of the armies? I gave up on marrying you off to some merchant's son since you got a face of a skeever, but that doesn't mean you couldn't put a helmet on and find some work for a soldier. Use those meaty arms of yours, girl, and quit sending me the money. I don't need your charity. Besides sounding like a jerk, Rigel's father seems to have no problem with insulting his own daughter, with probably one of the worst insults a Nord could give, especially to a daughter. Face of a skeever? That had to hurt. And plus, I don't think she looks that bad. I can only imagine years of childhood abuse that shaped little Rigel into this insecure, paranoid, hoarding bully with anger issues. It's honestly sad. But there's more as we get to read her reply. Now look here, Dad, you're the one who always told me that swinging an axe was the only thing I've ever been good at. So what do you expect me to do? The Stormcloaks pay dung for soldiering, and I'm not going to fight for those mud-sucking Imperials. I've got a good racket picking the traders off the road here, and I couldn't give a damn what you think about it. Your little saber cat has a tidy operation out here, and I'm not going to give it up just because you're afraid of getting caught. Oh, and quit trying to send back the money. These louts just try to steal it, and I have to beat their skull until they learn any different. And that seems to be it. I also find interesting that both Rigel and her dad don't seem to care about neither Stormcloaks nor Imperials winning the war, and that's something they have in common with bandits in general. They both seem rather apolitical, and Rigel strikes me as someone who would do well in the companions. Although I think that she will probably find it too cheap, because Rigel obviously wanted to hoard as much wealth as possible. Her treasure room, hidden behind a whole set of traps, including swinging maces, poison darts, and a battering ram, already contained a significant amount of wealth. Makes me wonder, what was she saving it for? In any case, Rigel's story, in my opinion, has a nice touch of melancholic sadness. A girl raised to be no more than a skeever-faced thug, gifted with exceptional strength, and caught in the middle of a civil war. And by no means do I justify her crimes, as she is responsible for many deaths. Her character is, dare I say, brilliantly written. I mean, for a minor role. Combining it with a unique, fun location, interior design, ambiental storytelling, it's one of those moments that makes Skyrim so much fun exploring.
Careful if you cross the river to the east. Old Hajvarr Iron-Hand and his brigands are holed up in that cave. White River Watch.
Hajvarr Iron-Hand is the leader of the White River Watch gang, located very near the city of Whiterun. I'll be honest, he doesn't have as detailed background story as Rigel and some other entries, but there is something about old Hajvarr, as guards call him, and his cave that's so memorable. First of all, I love the location. It's right across the White River, and the cave itself is rather linear and medium-sized. But there are so many small details, and as we're gonna see, side characters around Hajvarr himself, and they all make up for one interesting story worth telling. So, where do we begin? It was always my impression that White River Gang is among Skyrim's most renowned bandit groups. They own such an important, valuable spot by the road leading to and from Whiterun. And as we said, it's very near the city itself. This particular area had to be one of the busiest in the entire province, and Whiterun guards patrol the area only up to the bridge. Everything beyond is a wild land. So I believe that Hajvarr had to earn this valuable spot, proving his dominance over other bandit clans. Now, the reason why Jarl Balgruuf doesn't just send a group of guards to deal with Hajvarr is obvious. There's not enough manpower and there are simply more important issues. Remember, even Riverwood didn't have any guards prior to dragon attacks. And this in turn leaves daring bandit chiefs like Hajvarr free to operate so closely to large urban areas. It's almost like a game of chess. I've really loved the open area in front of the cave entrance. It looks so cozy, like a little campground, and in some peaceful, happier times, I'd imagine it as a popular family camping spot, if they even do that in Skyrim. First character to greet us inside is Ulfr the Blind, asking us if we are someone named Rudolf.
Who's there? Rodolph? That you? Boss was looking for you, said he'd be up at the summit. Better not keep him waiting.
I usually play along and leave Ulfr alive. I mean, he is blind after all. But he's also in fact Hajvar's uncle, and although blind, he's sat right at the entrance, serving as a guard. As for the Rudolph, that has to be a Nord that we met outside the cave. He apparently often plays pranks on Ulfr, as evident in this note to Rodolph, written by Hajvarr. Rodolph, your little stunts try my patience. I know my uncle has issues, but he's our watchman and you will respect him. No more sneaking in and out. No more games with his ledger or nails on his chair. One more joke and you'll see how funny a day in the cage can be. And as if that's not enough, further down the cave, we overhear a conversation between two bandits planning a mutiny.
So you win?
Yeah. We can't have that roomy-eyed fool as our watchman, even if he is Hajvar's uncle. Time we dealt with both of them.
We strike tonight at dusk. Be ready.
The thing is, this isn't even the first time, as later on we find out that at one point there was a rebellion led by someone named Anjolf, and luckily for Hajvarr, Ulfr overheard it and managed to warn him on time. In fact, this is what Hajvarr has to say about it in his journal. A mutiny among my men. I can hardly believe it. Thank the gods Ulfr heard it on time. He may be blind, but he's not deaf. I killed Anjor myself. A couple of the others ran for it, but we hunted them down quick enough. Only Eisa and Rajir got away. Good riddance. Now, we will talk about Eisa and Rajir later on, as actually we do meet them in-game, but for now let's stay at the White River Watch. There is another unique dialogue overheard between the bandits, and this time about a captured wolf that Hajvarr, I guess, wanted to be trained.
You think it'll work?
Course not. Dogs I could train, but a half-starved wolf? Not a chance.
Right. Lucky if it doesn't rip our throats out.
Hajvarr himself is found alone, outside the cave, high up in the mountains and shrouded in a mist. On a clear day, this spot offers one of the best views in-game, especially on the city of Whiterun and the surrounding roads. It feels extremely peaceful and quiet, and at the same time it gives Hajvarr sort of a formal, sublime dimension. Just seeing him sitting there alone, glaring into the distant horizons, and combined with his journal in which he shares daily random thoughts and insights into the life of a bandit in Skyrim, it's like for a moment Hajvarr becomes a much more important character. Someone who should be better known and more fleshed out. Skyrim really has a good way of occasionally giving insignificant character a sudden burst of meaning and importance. I only wish we could see more of that. With that said, Hajvarr Iron-Hands will attack on sight, with arrows or a two-handed weapon, which he swings particularly hard. Hajvarr is very dangerous at low levels, and this whole duel feels epic due to a highly elevated location. Once he's being dealt with, we are free to take his journal and read more of his random thoughts. Pickings have been good these past few weeks. Must be because of the war. Lots of merchants and cowards looking for somewhere to curl up and hide from all the fighting. I told the men to ease the burden on these poor souls by relieving them of all that gold they're carrying. It sounds to me that White River Gang doesn't actually kill people, at least not commonly, instead choosing to simply rob them and let them pass through. Next passage is about the trouble with the guards. Guard patrols along the road are way up. We can barely set foot outside. Travelers must have complained to the Jarl. It looks like the guard isn't ready to move against us yet, but the pressure is getting to the man. I'm having Rajir keep watch with Ulfr now. That should shut him up about our security. Damn that Balgruf. And Rajir is, by the way, not the Khajiit we met outside the entrance, as he and Eisa ran away after the failed mutiny. We already read about it, so let's see what else Hajvarr has to say. I especially love this line about the dragon rumors, reminding us that even bandits had to be aware of current situation. There's a rumor of a dragon attack on Helgen. A dragon? Hardly. More likely just a story made up by some idiot frightened out of his wits by the war. Hajvarr will also carry a unique pair of gauntlets, with a decent fortified two-handed enchantment. It's not so common for bandits, including chiefs, to have their own unique enchanted item, and this makes Hajvarr stand out even more. Now, we may conclude our overview of White River Watch, but this isn't where the story ends. As mentioned, we have a chance of meeting a couple of ex-gang members, Eisa Blackthorn and Rajir, and I want to include them because, in a way, they expand White River Gang lore, and Eisa in particular is an interesting character in her own right. There's this wonderful encounter outside Frostmere Crypt, a single female fighting off 3 bandits, and as we approach, we will be introduced to Eisa Blackthorn.
Who in Dagon's name are you? Speak, or I'll cut you down where you stand. I was part of the gang in the ruins here. Friend of mine went crazy and stole the boss's sword. They blamed me for it. Look, I'm done here. Mop the floor with these idiots for all I care. Just get out of my way.
Yep, this is the same Eisa mentioned in Hajvarr's journal, and her friend who went crazy and stole another boss's sword is Rajir. So it looks like 2 of them moved on having new adventures upon joining another group of bandits. But what's fun is that we have an option of sparing Eisa, after which she will, well, run away. If we decide to follow Eisa, we can see her fight off pretty much anything on her way all the way to Mortal. Road is dangerous and she may die, but if she survives, Eisa will remain hiding in the Moorside Inn for the rest of the game, nervously walking between the tables and refusing to talk to us, or anyone really.
Just stay out of my way.
However, we can also decide to explore Frostmere Crypt and try to find out what exactly happened here. It's a fun dungeon experience and a quest involving a legendary pale lady, a dangerous wisp mother, who was entombed here since the days of Iskramor. But before that, we should check the bandits killed by Eisa, as they will carry a bounty written by Kyr, their chief. Kill Eisa and Rajir on sight. 100 gold to whoever brings me their heads. Spread the word. Obviously, this all has to do because of the stolen sword. So let's investigate this little mystery and see if we can uncover more about Eisa's background. Right away, we can hear 2 bandits talking about Eisa and the recent events.
But Eisa? She's smarter than that.
Rajir was always dragging her into things.
But stealing the boss's sword? Did he have a death wish?
Who knows? The cat was crazy. She was a fool to trust him.
As we progress to the ruin, we will eventually discover 2 important notes, one written by Kyr and the other one by Eisa. Reading them both reveals quite a bit of information on Eisa and her turbulent past. So let's take a look at Kyr's log, focusing only on parts relating to Eisa. Frostmere Crypt, week 13. 2 new recruits, Eisa and Rigel. Girl said she did time in Sidna Mine, down in Markarth, and it shows. She's got more experience than all of us put together. I put her in charge of the dig. Cat's good with a blade, so I've sent him topside with the raiders. Week 14. Tunnels going well. Eisa made her first big find just yesterday. Buried chest with a couple of 100 gold. Topside, Rigel and his team have hit 5 merchants this week. In and out faster than the guard could respond. Looks like things are finally going my way. Week 15. The tunnel broke out into some kind of a giant cavern. There's a whole forest down there. Found a nice sword all laid out on some kind of monument and everything. But this is just strange. Eerie. What is this place? Not like any tomb I've ever seen. Week 16. I think the cat's gone crazy. All of a sudden he can't focus and keeps muttering to himself. He's gone from our best raider to our worst. Botched 2 jobs just today. Eisa's trying to cover for him, but she's not fooling anyone. Lately he keeps asking to see my sword, begging to borrow it, like I'll let him get his paws on it. It's beautiful, perfectly balanced, better than any I've ever held. Sure, he can have it, right in the gut. And that was Kyr's last entry. Now let's take a look at Eisa's more recent notes. Left the White River gang this morning with Hajvar's thugs on our tail. Wasn't a bad gig, but it was time to move on. Rigel and I weren't getting anywhere with him in charge. I'll never understand how he does it. I couldn't find so much as a rumor in Windhelm, while Rigel stayed outside the city, got wasted on moon sugar, and still managed to find us a lead. Some gang out Mortal way. They're holed up in an old ruin, digging it out between raids on the caravans. Join up with Kyr's band. Their treasure hunting dig is a disaster. 3 months of work have barely cleared a single haul, and 6 men have died from the cave-ins. I've taken charge of the dig, while Rigel is leading the raids topside. Maybe that year in Sidna Mine will pay off after all. You'd think a man who could swing a sword could use a pickaxe, but these louts are exhausted after barely an hour. No wonder this tunnel's taking forever. I've set up round-the-clock shifts and ordered double rations for the best diggers. That'll give them some incentive. Night shift woke me up to say they'd hit something big. Kyr, Rigel and I went down to take a look. It's huge, like a whole forest was just swallowed up by the earth, with a big old monument out in the center. Kyr took the sword from it as a trophy, proof his whole plan was finally paying off. For once, he might be right. Rigel has been having nightmares over the past few days. He keeps muttering about a pale lady, one of those swamp women who steal children away at night. I think, to think some fool story could turn the toughest bandit I know into a cowering kitten, frightened of his own shadow. I'm just glad none of the others see him like this. It's getting worse. Rigel can barely sleep at all now, and whenever he dozes off, he wakes up screaming. Woke the whole place last night. He says the pale lady is coming for us. She's down in the forest. We have to return the sword or she'll kill us all. Not a chance. The boss clings to that thing like he was born with it. I've told everyone Rigel just has a fever. But this can't go on. I've pulled a few things together. I'll sleep out tonight and never look back. So Eisa's journal, on one hand, continues the failed White River Watch mutiny storyline, as we found out what happened to Eisa and her faithful companion Rigel, only 2 members who managed to escape from Hajvarr Iron-Hand. They ended up in Windhelm, found a lead about a gang from Mortal, digging up some ancient ruin, and eventually they joined them. Eisa and Rigel were obviously no regular outlaws, as they soon took over leading positions under Kyr, their new chief. We also learned that Eisa spent a year in a notorious Sidna mine in Markarth, where she learned the craft of digging. This had to happen prior to her joining Hajvarr, since she joined Kyr's group right after escaping White River Watch. Again, it's such a lovely detailed background story about a character that sadly doesn't have much to offer. I kinda feel that Bethesda perhaps had some other plans with Eisa, maybe even making her a potential companion, which would be awesome. There aren't many, let's say, morally grey or just plain immoral companions out there. And what about her being a potential Dagon worshipper? There are just so many fun little tidbits about her character. It's really a shame that Eisa is doomed to remain a dead end without any purpose. As for the rest of the Frostmere Crypt storyline, but let's just say that Rajir indeed ambushed Kyr and stole his beloved sword, only to be most likely killed by Pale Lady herself, since we discover his lifeless body near the monument. To conclude, everyone ends up dead, except for Eisa Blackthorn. In many ways, she may just have the most bizarre, detailed, fun storyline out of all characters today. And through her case, we also find out a little bit more about how bandits work, as we learn that they may leave one group, join another one, and so on. Kyr was also interesting in the way that he planned to establish this Nordic crypt as his base, or home, while simultaneously raiding nearby caravans and digging up ancient ruin in search of artifacts. It's another worthy insight into the world of outlaws and bandit clans of Skyrim. They certainly have this nomadic element to them, while moving across the province in search of base of operations, but at the same time they do function as real tribes with hierarchies and laws. Alright, it's time to move on as well. Our next character is another female, and she's found in the infamous Fort Mistwatch. Every once a while, Skyrim would unsuspectedly throw at us a bittersweet or even plain sad moment. Not often, but it happens, and when it does, it kind of remains carved in the memory, like Rigel Strong-Arm's background, which I considered at least partially sad. Well, next story is really something. It's a little bit bizarre, sad, shocking, perhaps even funny, but it also comes with possible obscure lore reference, and it unravels in front of our eyes in the middle of this forgotten, half-ruined fort called Mistwatch, found at the bottom of a large mountain separating Rift and East March. It's actually quite a gorgeous location, overlooking these primordial-looking pools filled with bones, necromancers, and occasional hunters batting in this crystal-clear water.
Need something?
Even the bandits here carry a unique, location-specific name. They are called Mistwatch Bandits and carry more gold than your average random bandit, meaning whatever business they're doing, it's doing good. And Mistwatch Gang is all about ransoming. There's an actual random encounter with a woman who was kidnapped and imprisoned in Mistwatch, but luckily she managed to escape. She would simply mark the map with the location of Fort Mistwatch and urge us to go there and put an end to these kidnappers. However, encounter is not required to do this quest, so all we have to do is simply find the fort, clear the exterior from all the bandits, and go inside the lower tower. And that's when we meet this guy.
Hey, who's there? Stendar's mercy, you aren't one of them. Please, you've got to help me.
Oh, what's going on?
It's my wife, Fjola. I think she's being held in this tower.
Calm down, just tell me what happened.
I'm sorry. You're right. Let me explain. Fjola, my wife, left the farm on errands and never came back. It's been months, and I've been searching for her since. I heard a rumor that these bandits were ransoming captives, so I thought she may be here. I managed to sneak past the guards and get this far, but I don't think I can go on. I'm no warrior. Please.
And you're sure she's being held here?
Honestly, I have no idea. But I've looked all over, and the kidnappings here started around when she disappeared. So I have to hope.
So, this Krister lost his wife months ago, and he's been searching for her all over Skyrim, finally ending up in Fort Mistwatch. And I have to say, he should look into joining Thieves Guild, since I have no idea how he managed to sneak up inside the tower. Exterior is filled with guards, and entrance isn't even possible without lowering the bridge. That's quite a hidden talent that he has. Anyhow, our task now is very simple. We just have to move on, defeat any bandit on our way, and free any captive. But, of course, if it was that simple, we probably wouldn't talk about it. First tower has nothing else interesting, except for bandits and empty prison cells, so it's time to move on. So we're gonna go to the next middle tower, and hope that things will get a little bit more interesting. Middle tower is occupied by some heavy hitters, including an orc, and here we also find a dead imperial woman, and a blood-covered wall behind her. Could this be Fjola? Well, let's hope not. And after dealing with the bandits, we are free to read a note placed on a table. The lady we grabbed down by the river turned out to be a feisty one. Burbag thought he could beat some respect into her, but it looks like he used too strong a hand. The boss is not going to be happy when she hears about this. So we still haven't got an answer if the unfortunate lady is Fjola, but we do know how she died. It was the orc, Burbag, who used too much force, and the female bandit chief won't be happy about it. Not because she cares about captive's life, but because she won't be able to demand a ransom. Rest of the tower is empty and we can finally enter the last and the highest tower. And this one is occupied by a single person, female bandit chief and the leader of Mistwatch kidnapping business. As soon as we approach, she will surprisingly start a conversation.
Alright, Snowback. Who are you and what are you doing in my tower?
Stand aside, woman. I'm here for Fjola.
Fjola? How do you know that name?
Well, her husband sent me. Where is she?
Krister? He's here?
Wait, you know him?
The fool's my husband. I'm Fjola. Or I was, once. Don't you see? I left that old scab, came home to Skyrim and found this rabble of bandits. Didn't take much to prove myself and knock them into shape. Now every free blade from here to Windhelm wants to sign on for a peace.
That's quite a story.
And it won't end here. I'd die before I went back.
There's no way you'll come peacefully?
None. Not back to him.
What am I supposed to tell Krister?
I don't know. I never expected the old bag to follow me so far. Just get rid of him. But don't kill him. I don't hate the man. I just want him to go back to his farm and forget about me.
Well, I'll try getting him to leave.
Take my wedding band. Stoon only knows why I kept it this long. He'll recognize it. Tell him whatever you think will convince him to leave. The ring itself is worth a few bits. Keep it as thanks for cutting off the last vestige of an unwanted fate.
We will return later to analyze her dialogue, but for now, let's go back to Krister. The thing is, we can choose between several options. We could even kill Fjola right away, but I chose not to. At least not for now.
What news? Why isn't Fjola with you?
So, both options are lies, but I always choose the second one, telling him that Fjola is dead. My reasoning behind it is that Krister will at least stop his search for Fjola and go back to his farm. With the other option, he would simply continue his quest. And knowing that he'll never find his wife, it's really messed up. And for all intents and purposes, Fjola truly is dead for him, as she would rather die than go back to the farm. So in my opinion, best option is to let Krister return home and hopefully start a new life. Perhaps meet someone less adventurous. And with that done, we can return to Fjola and see what she has to say.
Oh, it's you. I didn't think you could handle this on your own. Did you get rid of Krister?
He won't bother you again.
How did... No, forget it. I don't care to know. I'm free of the little man and that's what matters. I owe you a debt and I aim to repay it. We'll see each other again someday. For now, goodbye and thanks.
And with that, Mistwatch questline is done. But I can't be the only one who feels something really weird about this whole situation. Like there has to be more to it. Why would a married woman leave her husband, move back to home province of Skyrim, I assume from Cyrodiil, only to start a kidnapping and ransoming business. Well, I believe that there might be a sneaky little hidden clue in both of their dialogues, Krister's and Fjola's. I'm going to replay both lines in question, and let's see if anyone notices something, let's say, unusual or curious.
Stendarr's mercy, you aren't one of them. Please, you've got to help me.
Take my wedding band. Stune only knows why I kept it this long.
As a fellow Stendarr worshipper, I couldn't help myself noticing that both mentioned Stendarr. However, Fjola specifically used a more ancient Nordic variation of Stune. And without getting too metaphysical, Stune and Stendarr are technically same deity, although there are some differences between them. Stendarr, that is widely known and worshipped today, is largely an imperialized form, while Stune is the Nordic god of ransom, fraternity, and justice. And he taught ancient Nords the benefits of taking hostages. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? Isn't that exactly what Fjola was doing here? Kidnapping people, basically taking hostages and ransoming? So in some weird, ancient Nordic way, all that Fjola was doing was, well, practicing her religious beliefs or freedoms. And to add on top of that, it looks like she is much younger than Krister.
I left that old scab.
And this particular line,
keep it as thanks for cutting off the last vestige of an unwanted fate,
sounds to me like their marriage was arranged. Similarly how Rigel's father tried arranging her marriage to some rich merchant's son. Krister is in fact a Nord as well, although he seems to be quite imperialized. He doesn't live in Skyrim, and even his name sounds more imperial. So it could be that Fjola simply had enough of an old, kind-hearted Krister and went back to homeland, starting a back to your roots kind of a thing. And all of this also plays into that overarching theory that bandits of Skyrim are, by large, simply Nords who follow the old ways, including the worship of Stune and Kine. They simply want to re-establish the old hidden way of life, abandoning current civilization formed on imperial laws. Overall, again, it may be partially true, I don't deny it, although I wouldn't say that this goes for literally every bandit in game. But it's definitely the case with Fjola. Speaking of, I also found it strange when she mentioned seeing us again. It sounds very specific, as if writers again had more on their mind when writing these characters. After Krister leaves the fort, never to be seen again, Fjola will remain alone in her tower for the rest of the game. I don't think that she was meant to be a potential companion, like in Eisa Blackthorn's case. If I had to guess, perhaps there was a plan of another encounter. In any case, Fjola will remain non-hostile and grateful for our help. But there's always an option of simply killing her. I think it's a fair deal, since she did a lot of harm to Skyrim and to poor old Krister. All in all, this is such a unique, bizarre moment in game. It's not life-changing, it doesn't shift the tides of war or something, but at least in my case, it made me stop for a moment and take a deep breath. We meet these characters coming with their own tragedies and histories, and the next moment, they're gone for good. It also made me worried for a moment, after seeing that beaten to death Imperial woman, making me believe it's Krister's wife. It was a nice trick by Bethesda, I have to admit. But it's time to leave the mists of Mistwatch and perhaps wash away all that tragedy, as we are about to head far, far north and meet our final character for today. And be warned, it's about to get really dark. Welcome to the icy shores of northern Skyrim. It's such a magical place, sublime, distant. You can practically hear echoes of Atmora, carried by the waves of Sea of Ghosts. While choosing the characters for today's video, I always knew I'd cover Rigel, Hajvarr, and Fjola, because I love those characters, even Eisa Blackthorn. But there were also several candidates for the final spot, and no matter what, my mind kept returning to someone who is regarded by many to be, well, the most evil character in Skyrim. And that's no joke, Competition is high, and definition of evil can be subjective. He is simply irredeemable, and at the same time, worthy of mentioning today. We could argue about Rigel's childhood abuse, and Hajvarr being a family-oriented, simple-minded barbarian who turned to crime due to, well, lack of career choices, and Fjola was simply worshipping Stune, ancient god of ransom. All these characters have something in them. I'd say something human, even a touch of melancholy and tragedy, a certain complexity. Arondil, on the other hand, may have complexity, but it's comprised of all things evil and vile. Again, there's nothing redeemable about him. And although he isn't classified as a bandit like previous characters, he is a villain with a rather detailed and, dare I say, interesting backstory. So let's take a deep breath and dive in. I discovered the ruins of Ingvild by pure random chance while exploring the northern coast of Skyrim. In case you didn't notice, I like it here. It's very Arctic and mystical. There's some kind of an elemental magic in the air, ancient Nordic aura. It's difficult to express, really. And just northeast of Dawnstar, there's a small island containing a Nordic ruin. However, entrance to the ruin is through a cave. I wasn't so surprised by the presence of wandering Draugr, although it was kinda strange that all of them were female. Well, maybe it was some ancient Nordic sisterhood, you never know. But then we encountered this, a strange phantasm, or a ghost, if you will. And again, all the ghosts were female, but there were also journals scattered around. And as we delved deeper into the dungeons, we also delved deeper into the mind of an obviously deranged individual. I will read all 4 journals, as they present a truly unique piece of literature, while at the same time giving us an insight into Arondil's background. Day 1. It seems the cretins of Dawnstar are not quite as foolish as I had surmised. They found my experimentations, and needless to say, were not pleased with what they saw. No matter, my work can only flourish without the distractions of living among the unenlightened. I have found a cave off the north coast of Skyrim. The ruins of Ingvild should hold the materials I need to learn more about reanimating and enslaving the dead. On a personal note, I will miss the young maidens of Dawnstar. Such beauty was intoxication. I often found my thoughts wandering around them, imagining secret encounters between myself and 1 or 2 of the local girls. Okay, that was interesting. All we know so far is that this Arondil lived in Dawnstar, where he performed forbidden necromantic experiments. He was discovered and expelled. I'd say rather luckily, as I'm surprised local Nords didn't just let him burn together with his house. And by the way, that's exactly what they did. They burned his house. Continuing through the dungeon, we will encounter more Draugr guardians and hostile ghosts. Next journal entry is from 1 week later and talks about Arondil arriving at Ingvild. I have established a temporary workstation in the cold caves and have found multiple burial chambers within the snow and ice. While in the first chamber, I exhumed a few test subjects, all female. I was stunned to find my mind wandering again to the woman of Dawnstar as I examined my find. At first, I was slightly disturbed by my thoughts, but later I found myself re-evaluating. Day 9. The first trials went splendidly. Each subject was reanimated in a state of total complacency, bending to my every task and whim. I have ordered a few of my new servants to guard the island, while the rest will act as my personal entourage, standing by me at all times. Standing watch over me while I sleep. Yeah, for those still wondering, Arondil isn't just a plain necromancer. No, that would be too basic for him. You see, Arondil also happens to be a necrophiliac, quite a deadly combination. But we still have 2 more entries to go through, so brace for more creepiness. Day 21. An intriguing development. Tonight my guards have brought me a trespasser they found near the cave. At first I was understandably upset. Not only was I disturbed during one of my few moments alone with my favorite servant, but I recognized the trespasser as a milkmaid from Dawnstar. She remembered me as well, and made bold claims that I had been lurking near her at all hours. What lies! True, I had taken notice of her on occasion, but she was nowhere near the most noticeable of maidens in the town. Her continued accusations, coupled with my fear of more uninvited guests, led me to conclude that she could never return to Dawnstar. My servants were quick to carry out my sentencing. Her body is here next to me as I write this. Funny, her eyes are still so full of life. Perhaps I will try a new experiment tonight, using fresher materials. And this is where it went from disturbing to abhorrent in the eyes of all that is holy. Fourth and the last journal update goes into disturbing detail about his new experiment. Day 28. The new experiment has proven a success. The milkmaid, whose name still escapes me, was revived as the others, bowing to my commands, with only one interesting development. She has reformed incorporeally, more phantasm than reanimated dead. As her glowing visage stood before me, I found my hand reaching out to touch her. As my fingers passed through her, I felt a sensation unlike any other, as if her essence were invigorating my very soul, connecting with me on a level no woman of flesh and blood could do. This discovery is life-changing. Day 35. I have ordered my older servants to go out and find any more subjects that may have become lost. With the discovery of the inner sanctum deeper still within Ingvild, I should have sufficient room to store many new materials until I can transform them into willing slaves. I look back on my daydreams whilst living in Dawnstar and wonder if they were in fact portents of times to come. So turns out all those ghosts were young females from Dawnstar, kidnapped by Arondil's Draugr guards, dragged inside and murdered, only to be reanimated as his pleasure servants of pure ectoplasm. There will always be one of them standing next to the seated Arondil, and one of them will be sleeping in his bedroom, behind the throne room. There's a fun way of dealing with a necromancer. If player manages to sneak in and removes this crystal, all surrounding ghosts will actually attack him. It turns out this crystal was channeling all the power over the reanimated servants. And luckily for us, Arondil decided to place it right there in the open. Although in my case, it didn't do as much, as Arondil easily defeated one of the ghosts. Needless to say, disposing Arondil feels great. For a change, I might add. Since in previous cases, there was always a bittersweet moment. Not here though. Even killing ghosts of all those poor women of Dawnstar kinda felt rewarding. I like to think that by doing so, we released their souls back into Aetherius. And now, before we sign off, I'd like to add that there's an actual quest line that sends the player to Ingvild. I never played it because it's through the Thieves Guild, and I was never much of a thief. But what's interesting is that person who sent us on a quest of obtaining all 4 of Arondil's peculiar journals is Vekel the Man. And from my understanding, he isn't really a standard member of the guild, and he wants those journals for an anonymous client. This may prove that Vekel is the man, if you catch my drift, for fulfilling odd, highly discreet jobs. And why do I say that? Well, story goes that one of the captured ladies managed to escape Ingvild. She was later found naked and shivering along the road to Dawnstar. The only information the guard could get from her were tales of strange experiments and Arondil scribbling in his journals. And then the word spread around until a certain individual heard and wished to obtain those journals, and for that was ready to pay good money. We never found out the identity of this mysterious client who hired Vekel the Man, but something tells me that he wants those journals for more than just pure entertainment. To me, this means that someone out there in Skyrim is more than willing to continue Arondil's work. Veckel also provides us with a little bit more information on Andoril, how locals burned his house down, after which he was never seen again. So what do you guys think? Is Arondil the most disturbing, deranged, evil character in Skyrim? Or do you have your own pick? And let me know your thoughts on other characters mentioned today, or some other that I could cover in future. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you all for watching. Until the next time, stay safe.
I ain't done nothing.